ABC, always be closing, starts at the first cold prospect call. Closing for a cold prospect call is different to closing a deal, for instance. However, it does have the same structure. So what success looks like, you've already decided in your housekeeping process. You may say success looks like a meeting. Success may look like intel, market information. I'm not sure. But you've already got what success looks like. So closing with regard to the next steps will simply be getting whatever you want out of the meeting. So for instance, a meeting. But there's also a period of time that you can start closing the prospect even while you're questioning them. Asking them, is there anything I've said today that doesn't meet your expectations? Is there any reason why we can't work together? Some of these questions that I mentioned on the closing session are valuable at this point in time as well. So I'd like you to think about closing with regard to a cold prospect in two different ways. The first one is the obvious one. It's the first tier of closing is the next steps, what success looks like. So you want to close the next step in the process, you want to close a meeting, you want to get something in the diary, you want to be able to have some dialogue about the proposal, for instance. And that's all well and good, and I think that in the previous closing session was quite detailed. However, closing is also something that you can start even before you've got the next step in the diary. So always be closing is there for a reason. Questions around why, is there any reason that you can't work together? Who else needs to be in the room? Who's the sign-off? What stakeholders? The more questions around the process and the more questions that give you information are closing questions. Is there any reason that we can't work together on this? That is a closing question, and that can be used on a cold prospect. So while I want you to get the meeting, and while I want you to get what success looks like, because you've already decided what that is when you've done your cold calling housekeeping, I think what is as important is to get the other information about why you can't work together, or what about your product or service doesn't meet their expectations. The information that you find out really arms you with what you do next. Is it going to be an ideal client? If you don't close and ask these questions at this point, what will happen is you'll get your meeting and success looks like, it's great, you've got your meeting. You turn up in the room and they tell you they're leaving the business, or that they're not really the decision maker and that something's changed. But if you close in from the start and asking questions, who needs to be in the room? How many people, who are the big stakeholders in this? How does this work? How does that work? Can we work together? What's the only barrier that's in the way? All of those awesome closing questions. You can then make sure that the meeting that you get to has the right people. It has the amount of people that you want, so you can shorten that sales cycle, and you can get a lot more meat out of that meeting. And this, for me, is something that I learned really late in my sales career. I used to just look at it quite one-dimensionally. Success looked like a meeting. That was all I was focused on. I got the meeting. And I remember very, very clearly traipsing around town, meeting all these wonderful people. And I had great meeting process and great objectives. But I found that because the quality of my original cold prospect call didn't ask enough questions and I didn't close them early on, that I get to these meetings and often they were not really the decision maker, or if they were, I needed lots of other people there. I could have saved myself weeks, if not months, on traipsing around going meeting after meeting if I just closed earlier on the cold prospect. I was so grateful for the meeting that I didn't take the moment to work out what the other benefits that I could get from that meeting and how that would serve the sales process.